The first quilt in this series is Pinwheel Tractor Block for Laura, many small pinwheels surrounding a larger tractor block. The pattern is out of Farm Girl Vintage by Lori Holt that my Aunt Gail suggested. The pattern follows a slightly different construction method, yielding 4 half-square triangles to every 5-inch square. I made 2 half-square triangles out of every 5-inch square. Here are some of my blues. First, I drew a diagonal line from corner to corner. Then I sewed a 1/4 inch either side of that line, cut them apart, press the seams open, and then I have 2 half-square triangles. Now this one just will not do. It's not square, and the corner doesn't match. I understand this is prissy and won't matter to many people, but even a 1/16 inch off adds up, so it's worth it to me to square the squares. I lay the squares out so I know I'm sewing them to their correct mate and in the correct direction. But I try to press one seam up and one seam down, so when I sew the 2 halves together, they bump up against each other. And I get great centers! Yay! It's like winning each and every time I see the diagonals meet in the center. So, it was about now I realized I miscounted and made an absurd number of pinwheels. Next, I had to take all those squares and trim them to size. To make a 5-inch pinwheel, I trimmed 2.5 inches either side of the center seam. All this trimming gave me a crazy pile of scraps. On to the tractor. The Farm Girl pattern gives excellent instructions for sewing the tractor block. I wasn't quite sure what layout I wanted to use, and so auditioned several. I decided on a slightly smaller version of the pattern. After all that trimming, it was here, with a few curse words, that I realized I cut the pinwheels the wrong size. I should have just followed the directions like a normal person. My fix was to trim the tractor border to fit my pinwheels. Here's the back that shows how I tried to handle my seams. The smoother my quilt top, the easier and nicer it will be to quilt. It's exciting to see the quilt top done. Next is making the quilt sandwich and pin basting. My first step in quilting was to use a regular presser foot and the dual feet or walking foot quilting in the ditch, up and down my seams. I drew in my exhaust swirls and free motion quilted them with a navy thread. Then I outlined the tractor pieces and stippled the background of the tractor block. Final step, the binding! Since this is a big rectangle without curves, I cut my binding as straight with the fabric strips, but I did join them on the bias to reduce bulk in the edging. Then I pressed the long strip in half and sewed it to my quilt top with my 1/4 inch guide. I used the Fonz and Porter binding tool, thank you Miss Sue, to match up the ends of my binding. First I trim one end, then measure with the tool so that when the ends are bias pieced back together, they will be the correct length to finish the quilt. Sew the ends together on the bias again. See? Perfect length. Trim the triangle ends off, and I finger press the seam open. Then I line it up to finish sewing the binding on. I press my binding out flat, then just hand whip stitch it to the back. And there it is, Pinwheel Tractor Block for Laura. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a great day. Tune in to Sew with Jennie next week for Brianna's Cheery Cherries.